Yo, what's up? Footy Mayo, keep it steady, yo. I hope you're keeping it steady. So this video, we're gonna go totally different. Something I've been wanting to get into. I just had to make you stop spinning first. So now we're gonna look at historical facts here and record. You know, what's been documented, what's been drawn, what's been talked about in books and discussions and different records from the past. All right, and this is in regards to the aboriginal native tribes that were in the Americas. And I'm talking about North, Central, and South, right? So I'm talking about the copper-colored native tribes that were here. And I'm going to connect this. And I hope you can take this journey with me to see that it might even be Hebrew tribes, lost tribes. We'll see. We're going to look at the logic, what we have as evidence, what's in the records, archaeological finds, the myths, the legends of the native tribes, and that's how we're going to put all this together. It's going to be pretty long, maybe 2 hours, You know, we're going to try to divide it into 2 videos. And if you don't like this, you know, you can just go to another channel, go watch some cute puppies somewhere in another channel. They got 1 million views, you know, the cute puppies, you know, and all that other stuff. If you want some wisdom, some knowledge, if you want to think about different things, you want to, if you like history, mysteries, then you're gonna love this video. And so I hope you like it. You know, you can see it's just me against the world, right? Like my boy Pac said, right? Tupac Amaru. Where do you think he got that name? Tupac Amaru, just like the Inca emperors. Alright, you think his mom didn't know where they were from? The original Incas, Mayas, Hopi, Algonquin. Alright, we're gonna show you who they were. The Anasazi, the Aztecs, copper colored. Alright, tune in.
Virtually none of Thanksgiving has an ounce of accuracy, notes the bestseller Lies My Teacher Told Me. The idea of Europe bringing civilization to the Americas simply flips truth on its head. This is what European explorers actually found in North America.
Far and away the most beautiful city on earth. 5 times the size of London or Rome. Great towers and buildings rising from the water. 60,000 gleaming houses, and how spacious and how well built they were. Of beautiful stonework and cedar wood, and the wood of other sweet-scented trees. The many streets and boulevards of the city were so neat and well swept, despite the multitude of inhabitants, crisscrossed with a complex network of canals, like an enormous Venice, but also remarkable floating gardens that reminded of nowhere else on Earth.
While Europe was drinking water from its polluted city rivers, huge aqueducts transported America's water from fresh springs.
But what impressed most were the special merchant areas, where timber and tiles and other building materials were bought and sold, as well as greengrocer streets, where one could buy every sort of vegetable, fruits, honeys, nut paste and chocolates, astonished by the personal cleanliness and hygiene of the colourfully dressed populace, and by their extravagant use of soaps, deodorants, and breath sweeteners.
Most Europeans never bathed and kept clothes on at all times. The Pilgrim's Notes biographer Zini Feiner had a terrible smell. Indians tried, quote, without success to teach them to bathe. The settlers also had bad breath from rotting teeth. Death and starvation was so common that corpses were just dumped in open pits known as poreholes. Many turned to alcohol and committed suicide. In fact, the story of the first settlers has been deliberately changed, notes author James Lowen, because the truth is so shameful. They actually settled hundreds of miles further south and stayed in America because the mission was a failure. Their real aim, reports historian Robert Beverly, was to find some gold and take it back to Europe.
They spent their days digging random holes in the ground, haplessly looking for gold instead of planting crops. Soon they were starving and digging up putrid Indian corpses to eat. They took some Indian prisoners and forced them to teach the colonists how to farm.
And the meal with the natives wasn't quite the Thanksgiving shown on TV and in school books.
The colonists offered the Indians a toast to eternal friendship, whereupon the chief, his family, advisors, and 200 followers dropped dead of poison.
In mainstream history books, perhaps the most common description of American territory then is virgin land. In fact, notes historian Peter Jennings, it was widowed. Horrific enough, the Nazi ethnic cleansings in Europe during World War II. Leading American studies professor David Stannard notes it's dwarfed by, quote, far and away the most massive act of genocide in the history of the world. The death of 100 million indigenous people in the, quote, American Holocaust. Some from disease, but also vast numbers from a deliberate policy aimed at wiping out the race that mainstream history books continue to pretend never happened. He notes when Heinrich Himmler called the final solution, quote, delousing, Himmler was only echoing the Pilgrim Army's rallying cry, nits make lice, nits being Indian babies. This was a map of Indian nations across the US. 80% of the first government's entire budget went on attacking existing Indian settlements to take their developed farmland. Settlers would most probably not have survived, writes Jennings, on their own. 95% of America's entire population was then wiped out. American Holocaust notes there is documented evidence of colonist leaders going town after town, deliberately killing all men, women and children. Yet school texts and history books remain silent. Orders came from the very top. Under the direct order of George Washington, at least 28 of 30 Seneca towns and all the towns of the Mohawk, Onondaga and Cayuga were simply obliterated. George Washington wrote, the Indian country, quote, must be destroyed. Thomas Jefferson called to, quote, pursue Indians to extermination. Nobel Peace Prize winner Theodore Roosevelt called beneficial the eradication of the native race. Stannard notes genocide was official public policy. California Governor Peter Burnett in his 1851 message to the legislature.
Extermination must continue to be waged until the Indian becomes extinct.
Another governor issued the public proclamation to, quote, pursue, kill and destroy all Indians. A witness notes the ensuing bloodbaths practically wiped out the native race.
The whites shoot them down like wolves, men, women and children, wherever they could find them. This war of extermination against the aborigines is tending to the final extinction of the race.
What reportedly saved the race from extinction was their use as slave labor.
This extermination policy has proved so injurious to the interests of the whites. Indian labor is indispensable.
Highly prized slaves were Indian girls as young as 3, said the Marysville Appeal, for fulfilling double roles of labor and of lust.
The Pilgrims had hardly explored the shores 4 days before they robbed the graves of my ancestors and stole their corn, wheat, and beans. The Indians knew this fact, yet welcomed and befriended the settlers, little knowing that they would be killed by the settlers' guns.
Yeah, so you see what they did, right? You see the real history. Check that book out if you can. Lies My Teacher Told Me. That's what they were talking about. So what I wanted to basically point out is how the Spanish described the cities when they came. How beautiful they were, how big they were, how clean they were. Right? Bigger, 5 times bigger than London. 5 times bigger than Rome. Imagine, 5 times bigger than Rome. Rome was pretty big. They conquered a lot of land. So 5 times big as Rome. That's the whole continent. That's the whole America. North, South, Central. They're talking about the Incas, all of them together. They're all connected, right? And then the other thing is how they were, their hygiene. You know, that's the other thing, their hygiene. You know, how clean they were. They had deodorant, they made soap, they had breath mints, you know, they bathed. The colonists, they stank. The Europeans didn't bathe. They were nasty. You know, they didn't have that notion like holy people would have, clean people will have, spiritual people would have. People who have a common sense and consciousness with nature to, like, you know, be clean, be pure. You know, so you see what they did. They just exterminated everybody. Now we're going to talk about their characteristics, right? How would the Indians characteristics, how were their personalities? That's what we're going to talk about right now. And that's from a descendant of colonists, right? Somebody who was in the 1800s writing a book. It's called Popular History of the United States. from Aboriginal to the present day by John Clark Redpath, I believe, 1876. Regarding their characteristics, says right, the Indians were strongly marked with national peculiarities. The most striking characteristic of the race was a certain sense of personal independence, willfulness of action, freedom from restraint. You heard that? They want to be free. They're independent people. They don't want to be ruled. To the red man's imagination, the idea of a civil authority which should subordinate his passions, curb his wills, and thwart his purposes was intolerable. Among this people, no common enterprise was possible, unless made so by the currents of free wills. Okay? Intolerable. I know you feel like that too. It's intolerable. Injustice. There's no justice. Who was here before Columbus? I mean, I know you see a lot of pictures of the Indians and the natives, and you know, light skinned like me, long hair, a little bit like me. Some look like Chinese, darker and stuff. But that came after. That was the Mongolian Asian migration. Okay, that was after. The original tribes were a couple colored. I'm going to show you. That's what I'm going to show you right now. I was referencing the Mayas earlier. You know, and all of that. The Aztecs creation, with how it's very similar to the Bibles. Yeah. Now, what I'm about to tell you is, you know, might be out of your thinking, but what if I told you that the tribes that were here on this side of the world, American continents, north, south, central, a lot were the biblical tribes talked about in the Old Testament, as well as in reference to the Hebrew ones, the Israelite tribes, the tribes of Judah, the tribes of, you know, the 12 tribes. So it says here, from etymology online, let's go right there right now. You see what I'm showing you right here? It's going to be for a reason. So Yahweh, right? Or let's see, what do we call Jehovah, right? Etymology. Tinsdale transliteration of Hebrew tentagram Yahweh, using the vowel points of Adonai, my Lord. See Yahweh, use Yahweh. Okay, so let's go to Yahweh. Okay, let's read this very carefully now. Yahweh, 1869 hypothetical reconstruction of the tetragrammation YHWH, see Jehovah, based on the assumption that the tetragrammation is the imperfective of Hebrew word Hawa, earlier form of Heya, was, Heya, was, in the sense of the one who is, the existent. And so it says here, I am that I am. It is the common English translation of the response that God used in the Hebrew Bible when Moses asked for his name, Exodus 3:14. It is one of the most famous verses in the Torah. Heya means existed. In Hebrew, Eyeh is the first person singular imperfect form and is usually translated in Bible, English Bible as I am, or I will be, or I shall be. For example, Eyer Asher Eyer literally translates as I am who I am. Okay, so what did it tell you? One of the most famous verses in the Torah. So it says here, in appearance it is possible to render Yahweh as an archaic third-person singular imperfect form of Heya, to be, meaning, therefore he is. It is notably distinct from the root El, which can be used as simple noun to refer to the creator, deity, general creation agrees. Where God is represented as speaking, hence as used in the first person, Ayah, I am. Other scholars regard the transcendental root of Hawa as more likely origin of the name Yahweh, Hawa, and Heya. Earlier form of Heya, Hawa, Heya, 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 Heya. Now sing with me. Heya, 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 Heya. See what I'm trying to tell you? You think they were just saying hey ya for nothing? So Yahweh, they were saying Yahweh in their way, in the original way. Or Lord, or God, Creator, I am, He exists, to be. Okay? The most important kind of freedom is to be what you really are. You trade in your reality for a role. You trade in your sense for an act. You give up your ability to feel and exchange, put on a mask. There can't be any large-scale revolution until there's a personal revolution on an individual level. It's gotta happen inside first. Hey, hey, So it says here, Webster's Dictionary, 1828, American, adjective pertaining to America. American, a noun, a native of America, originally applied to the aboriginals, or copper-colored races, found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. Alright, I don't know if you guys just understood that, but I'll do it one more time. In Webster's Dictionary, 1828. American, originally applied to the aboriginals, or copper-colored races, found here by the Europeans. Copper-colored races. Copper-colored races. Hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah. Hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah. Hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah, hey yeah. Copper-colored races. The original inhabitants of America were of dark complexion, dark people. The lighter Asian Mongolians came later. Do you know your history? Do you know who you are? Continuing in the book, A Popular History of the United States of America from John Clark Redpath, it says, beyond the Rocky Mountains are the Indian nations of the plains, the great family of the Shoshones, the Salish, the Klamaths, the Californians. On the Pacific slope farther southward dwelt in former times the famous races of the Aztecs and Toltecs. These were the most civilized of the primitive Indian nations, but at the same time among the most feeble and the best builders in wood and stone, but at least warlike of any of the aborigines. Yeah, right. Such a brief sketch of the distribution of the copper-colored race in the New World. So again, such is a brief sketch of the distribution of the copper-colored race in the New World. Do you know who you are? Can you remember? Hey, hey, you know who you are. Chief. Chief. Dark. This is their drawings. Do you know who you are? Californian Indians. Old picture. Do you know who you are? Originally applied to the aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. Hey. copper color. These next pictures are like, especially from people up in Boston and New England area. I'm gonna show you what tribes were over there during that time. When the Pilgrims came, for Thanksgiving. I mean, you saw the video that reported from RT how they poisoned the chiefs and everybody. They invited them for dinner, then they poisoned them. That was the Thanksgiving right there. These people were starving. And I'm gonna show you the people that were here. And they look. I don't know. Hopefully, my Cape Verdean people are watching this. You can see, because a lot of those people were brought to Cape Verde that were in New England. The Portuguese and the Dutch and all these people, they brought them to Cape Verde. The whole Labrador Indians, Nova Scotia, New England, a lot of them were Algonquin, so a lot of them were taken to the Botoc. The whole nation of Botoc were taken to the Cape Verde Islands. And so I'm going to show you how these people looked in this region. And it's funny, they look like them. Some of them look Cape Verdean. So, are you really African? So, I'm just saying, think about it, This is the book Lies My Teacher Told Me. Really good book, I read it a long time ago. In 1501, the Portuguese began to depopulate Labrador, transporting the now extinct Botoc Indians to Europe and Cape Verde as slaves. After the British established beachheads on the Atlantic coast of North America, they encouraged coastal Indian tribes to capture and sell members of more distant tribes. Charleston, South Carolina became a major port for exporting Indian slaves. The Pilgrims and Puritans sold the survivors of the Pequot War into slavery in Bermuda in 1637. The French shipped virtually the entire Natchez Nation in chains to the West Indies in 1731. The Botoc are the aboriginal people of the island of Newfoundland. They were Algonquin-speaking hunter-gatherers who probably numbered less than 1,000 people at the time of European contact. Probably, they say, right? The Botoc are the descendants of the recent Indian culture called the Little Passage Conflict. And it says here, the case of Santu, right? It's an extract from Frank Speck's book, Botoc and Micmac, 1922, page 55 to 70. And it says, the most surprising occurrence, however, in recent years concerning the fate of the Botoc Indians was the accidental discovery of an old Indian woman named Santu, who claimed that her father was one of the last survivors of the Red Indians of Newfoundland. Since considerable discussion was aroused over the innocent claim of the old woman when I had made public, I shall give the circumstances in some detail for the benefit of those who may wish to determine to what extent her testimony may be relied on, before making use of the information and the brief vocabulary obtained from her. Yeah, so this is Shana Titit. This is the last known Botoc Indian alive. This is the depiction. Look at the features. Doesn't look like the red Native American that they show us in pictures. This looks a lot different. Looks more like people I know in Boston or any part of the world. It could be anything, but just look at the features. All right, so these are all the areas that these are the areas that I'm going to reference now, the tribes that I'm going to show you. Not all of them, but I can show you a little bit of the Wampanoag, the Narragansett, the Nipmuc, we also have the Massasoit, the Shinnecock, the Montauk. We're also going to show you some pictures of the Martha's Vineyard native and the last Nantucket native. So if you want to research all the rest of them, just go ahead and do it on your own. You'll start seeing the features and what I'm talking about. Alright, so this is the New England area. This is what the Pilgrims encountered. This is the areas.
Geronimo once said, I was born on the prairies where the wind blew free, and there was nothing to break the light of the sun. Oh. Oh, honor to Mother Earth, to our Creator, to the Great Spirit, with the hope that we can all live together in peace and freedom on this planet. Oh.
Since the differences among the several Indian tribes are far less than has been supposed. Brinton argued, and he went on to assert that the Aztecs of Mexico and the Algonquins of the eastern United States were not far apart. If we overlook the objective art of architecture in one or two inventions, and to conclude that the American culture, wherever examined, presents a family likeness, which the more careful observers of late years have taken pains to put in a strong light. A common Indian culture had developed out of inherent features Brinton sought to show, and this culture had political system and architecture surpassing anything achieved by Africans or Polynesians, and a stone, clay, and wood artistry that stands next to, he says that of the white race, of course his race. Okay, so there you go, he's saying how they resemble the Algonquins, the Aztecs. Alright, so why I wanted to show you this, why did I want to show you this? Because we're talking about orientation. At first I had to get you to stop spinning. Now I need you to understand some history, some real history connected with the Bible and what, how it all fits together. Okay, so in the Larkin Museum in Lima, Peru, lightning. You heard the lightning? Because we're breaking the spell, baby. The energy in the air is like, wow. I'm gonna continue with that. I hope you didn't get scared. So it says in Lima, Peru, there is a photograph of the Inca nobleman and his son's painting with this quote from Garcia Lasso de la Vega below it. So what are we seeing here? Black, noble people, Incas. What is this? Depicting the Inca emperors, this panel from the Larco Museum in Lima, Peru. Shows the last 7 Inca emperors. And if you notice, also the first European emperor of the Inca, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, a black man. Now we're gonna get into how Europe, everybody was dark skinned too. Okay, like we're gonna get into that. I'm gonna show you that. I'm gonna show you this. Okay. So this painting can be dated back to the 1800s because the last two entries are the Carlos III as the 24th Inca Emperor and his son Carlos IV, House of Bourbon, as the 25th Inca Emperor. So he reigned as King of Spain from December 14, 1788 to March 19, 1808. What are we talking about here? I'm going to get into this right here. Japheth. Much of modern Russia, parts of modern Georgia, and the Caucasus region, Huns, ancient Masaka, Musakh, Moshi, Mosca, and Muscovy in Cappadocia, Moscow reflects the old name possible migration as far as South American. So it says, starts right here, goes off to Asia. Possibly the Moshe and cultures in South America and now dead Moshika languages in Peru. Moshe warrior, Moshe, Moshika. Wikipedia, Meshach. Well, in the Bible, Meshach or Meshach, Hebrew, price or precious, is named after a son of Japhet in Genesis 10:2 and 1 Chronicles 1:5. Another Meshach is named as a son of Aram in 1 Chronicles 1:17. The son of Japheth, remember, Meshach. Genesis 10:151 and Chronicles 1:17, Moshach, the Mosocheni. Greek, called them the Cappadocians. Homeland, Turkey city Masaka, modern Kayseri, Turkey. A trace of the occupation of the high platform of Asia Minor by this people is found in the old name for the great capital city called in later times Caesarea, right, which was Masaka. Josephus speaks of this town as founded by the Meshach, the son of Japhet, whom he makes the progenitor of the Mosecheni or Moshi, the Mosecheni or the Moshi, and the Mosocheni were founded by Mosoch. Now they are Cappadocians. There is also a mark of their ancient denomination still to be shewed, for there is even now among them a city called Masaka, remember that, Masaka, which may inform those that are able to understand that so was the entire nation once called. So the entire nation was once called Masaka or Mosak, right? Moshek, Mosak, Meshek, the whole nation. For there is even now among them a city called Masaka, which may inform those who are able to understand that so was the entire nation once called. So they're saying that they were called Meshach, right? Meshach. We're gonna hear about the Meshika and the Moshe people, Meshach. And we're gonna learn about the Phoenicians speaking Meshika and the Incas speaking Meshika. And the Aztecs' ancient name is Mexica. We're going to learn all that. So it continues here. Meshach, which means drawing out. Sons for Dedan, Saran, and Sheshbashi also. Another word is Meshach, 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 Meshwesh, Meshki, Meshera, Munch, Munchki, Munchki, Mishi, Muski, Mushku, Mosku, Moskiva, Muska, Muska, Muskai, Maskali, Mashar, Maskusi, Masaka, Masaka, Mashketos, Mochketos, Moderes, Moshki, Moshki, Mosa, Mosher, Mosh, Moshis, Moshosh, Moshi, Moshian, Moshakian, Moshok, Moshok, Moshoy, Mosocheni, Mosochian, Mosins, Mosinoshi, Moscav, Moscovi, Moscow, Muscovites, Latvians, Lithuanians, Romanians, other related groups. So Masaka is the ancient name for the capital of Cappadocia. What does the word Meshach mean? In the Aramaic language that the Phoenicians generally spoke, Meshika. Remember that word, Meshika, they spoke Meshika. The real word for Meshach means Messiah. In Turkish, a similar word means Messi or Meshi. Moshe, Wikipedia. Moses or Moshe is a male given name after the biblical figure Moses. According to the Torah, the name Moses comes from the Hebrew verb meaning to pull out or draw out of water. So, to pull out or draw out. Where do we see that? Let's go back. Meshek, drawing out. Meshek, drawing out. What does Meshek mean? What does it mean? It means Messiah. Messiah. Moshe. Right? Meshek, Moshe. Moses. To draw out. Meshek, Moshe. Of what? The story of the Aztec. Now, this is why I keep bringing you back to the Americas. Now, remember, I showed you who the copper-colored people were, right? Like the American dictionary says, right? The story of the Aztec Exodus to what is now Mexico City contains elements that are unmistakably like those of the Moses myth. For example, the Aztecs were enslaved for a number of years by the evil king. Then a prophet, Meshi, led them on their search for the promised land. Meshi, almost like the Hebrew Moshe, Moses. Here, so it says here, here's the account of the migration of the Aztecs by historian Fray Diego Duran. In the year 1193, after the birth of our Redeemer, Jesus Christ, the Aztec nation reached this land. These people, like others who populated the country, departed from 7 caves in a land called Aztlan. The people were called Aztec, which means people of whiteness. They were also called Mesitin or Mexicans, in honor of the priest Lord who guided them. Mexic, right? Mexicans. So it says, we at the Americas know them as the Mexica. Mexica? What did the Phoenicians speak? In the Arabic language that the Phoenicians generally spoke, Mexica. We of the Americas know them as Mexica. Who are the Mexica? Mexican. Mexica is their Nahuatl name. And Michoacan in Mexico. Moshe or Mexica in Peru. Mosquito in Nicaragua. Here in the United States, they are called Muskegon, Muskogee, Michigan, Mohica, etc. The Hopi origin myths speak of the Moski, where they once lived. Alright, so we remember, right, the Meshech, right? The son of Japhet, the Meshechs, right? They ruled to India, Asia, all those areas. It seems that they were following a certain migration path because they were able to trace them to South America and the American tribes. So again, Meshech, right? Meshech, Mexica. Meshech means, look. So in the Arabic language, the Phoenicians generally spoke Mexica. Meshech means Messiah, Messiah, Meshich, Moshe, Moises, Moses, Moshe. Alright? So it says, they were also called the Mesitin or Mexicans, Meshik, in honor of the priest and Lord who guided them. In honor of the priest Lord who guided them, whose name was Meshi. Meshi. Okay, so what? Check this out. In Phoenicians generally spoke Mexica. The real word for Meshech means Messiah. In Turkish, a similar word means Messi or Meshi. Moshe, Moses or Moshe is a male given name after the biblical figure Moses. And what this is Wikipedia, Mexica. The Nahuatl pronunciation, or Mexicas, were indigenous peoples of the Valley of Mexico, known today as the rulers of the Aztec Empire. And so the Aztec had a story unmistakably like those of the Moses myth, or Moshe, right? Moses, Moshe, Moshe, Messiah. And who are the Mexica? What did the Phoenicians speak Mexica? They were the Aztec. The Aztecs referred themselves as the Mexica or the Tenochtitlan, were the Native American people who dominated northern Mexico at the time of Spanish conquest. The Mexica are eponyms of the place named Mexico. This refers to the interconnected settlements in the valley which became the site of what is now Mexico City, which held natural and geographical and population advantages. We had the Tarascan Indians of Michoacan descend from the Taras Chakas, Scythian chiefs of Taras, pole star pirates and navigators. because they were so close relatives to the biblical Meshechs. They also called themselves the Meshechgana, Meshech tribe, which later became Michoacan. The legends of the Aztecs stated that they, the Mexica, or Shiva Phoenicians, were once partners of the Tarascans, just as the Bible says. Now there was a group of people known as Moshe, or Moshi, or Meshera, in Peru, South America. The Moshe civilization, also known as the Moshika. Okay, Moshe, so say Moshika, Mexica. Okay? What is the difference? Moshika, Mexica flourished along the northern coast and valleys of ancient Peru, in particular in the Chicama and Trujillo valleys between 1 CE and 800 CE. What does it say about Moshika in Wikipedia? It tells us it's a Chimuan language, formerly spoken. So Moshika, a language. Where do we see Mexica language? The Phoenicians generally spoke Mexica, a language. A Chimuan language, Mochica, formerly spoken along the northwest coast of Peru and inland village. First documented in 1607, the language was widely spoken in the area during the 17th and the early 18th century. By the end of the 19th century, the language was dying out and spoken only in the few people in the village of Eaton and Chiclayo, or almost like Chicago. It died out, spoken around 1920, so just 100 years ago, it still existed. Alright, so the Meshechs, right? They went all the way to South America, man. I'm telling you, you saw all the connections there. If you look up the etymology of the word, you will find all this stuff, you know, you're connected. So we're going back, you know, we keep going back, it keeps telling us we're going to America, baby. We're going somewhere. We're gonna trace this, you know. We're gonna see this. Okay, so so far we got like a lot of things pointing to like Hebrew tribes in America, the natives. I mean, all right. So I'm gonna keep pulling out some more things. So we're talking about these Hebrew Israelite tribes, right? Who were these Hebrews? Hebrews. Remember, every word has meaning. So I want you to bring your focus onto Eber. So from Shem came Arphaxad or Arphaxad, Shalah, then Eber or Salah, Eber. So let's look at another. So we have from Adam we have Seth, you know, and then came from Seth Noah. From Noah came Shem, and Shem had Arphaxad, Salah, and Eber. Eber had Peleg. So who is this Eber? The word Hebrew, descendants of Eber, those that did not build the Tower of Babel. Okay, so it says Hebrew does not mean Jew, although some Judeans may be Hebrews. Genetically speaking, Hebrew means any descendant of Eber or Eber. Eber, an ancestor of Abraham, was the great-great-grandson of Noah. Spiritually and behaviorally, Hebrew carries inherently politically divisive connotations. So look at what this word Eber also carries, the meaning and the energy. So it means separated, the other side, those who live on the other side, independent, stateless, not the subjects of any human ruler, foreign to all worldly nations, migratory, beyond, that which is beyond, sojourner on the earth, one who is passing through, passer through, as distinct from a settler in the land or resident of the nations, descending either behaviorally or genetically from Eber, following the path of Abraham, living according to the separatist holiness instructions of Abraham's Elohim, Yahweh. Okay, so let's keep reading. Just want you understand what's going on here. So after Noah landed the ark, his wife birthed him a son named Shem, from who came a man the Bible names as Eber. Eber resisted Nimrod's command to build the Tower of Babel in an act of outrageous disloyalty to Nimrod, Eber crossed over from Babylon to the land across the river. In the wilderness, Eber and his people retained the Hebrew language. Meanwhile, back in Babylon, Hawa confused the languages of everyone else. The name Hebrew rested on Abraham, whose name comes from that of his great-granddaddy, Eber. You can find this on this website here. So, what's important here? So, we all know the story of the Tower of Babel, how, you know, the humans were getting too close to God, and that God didn't like that, and so he took down the Babel because he didn't want them to know, you know, be like the gods, right? That's what it says in the Bible, the gods, right? So he didn't, you know, him and his family didn't partake. So what did he do? What does it say he did? He separated those who live on the other side. They became independent, no foreign ruler. So what they bounced, they left, and they went into the wilderness, where they retained their Hebrew language, land across the river. Okay, so very important. So what are we talking about here, huh? Eber, Hebrew, Tiberian Hebrew, Eber is an ancestor of the Israelites, according to the table of nations in Genesis 10:11 and 1 Chronicles 1. He was a great-grandson of Noah's son Shem, and the father of Peleg, born when Eber was 34 years old, and of Joktan. He was the son of Selah, a distant ancestor of Abraham. According to the Hebrew Bible, Eber died at the age of 464, when Jacob was 20. And look what this says again, and this is from Wikipedia. According to Abu Isa, and a lot of people know who that is, you know, Eber, the great-grandson of Shem, refused to help with the building of the Tower of Babel, so his language was not confused when it was abandoned. He and his family alone retained the original human language, a concept referred to as lingua humana in Latin. Hebrew, a language named after Eber. So you see what are they telling us here, man? They kept the original language, and they didn't help build the tower. They bounced. They went somewhere else. Okay, so he separated himself from the other tribes. Okay? Where did they go to? And unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided. And his brother's name was Joktan. So look what it's telling us here. So he had a son named Peleg, and it says that in his days, during Peleg's day, the earth was divided. What does that mean? Separated. Maybe the lands? Cataclysm? Atlantis? Separation? Separated. The earth divided. Chronicles 1:19. 1 Chronicles 1:19. And unto Eber were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg, because in his days the earth was divided. His brother's name was Joktan. Unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born. Okay, so these are all the accounts of Eber in the Bible. Okay. So it says the Hebrew word, etymology. The origin of the term remains uncertain. That's what they say. But a biblical term, Ivri, right? Ibri, meaning to traverse or pass over, is usually rendered as Hebrew in English from the ancient Greek. In plural, it is Ivrim or Ibrim. Terracotta head of Semite-marked Hebrew by Petrie from Memphis, Foreign Quarter, Egypt, Greco-Roman period. The Petrie Museum of Egyptian Archaeology in London. In Genesis 10:21, Shem, the elder brother of Ham and Japheth, firstborn of son of Noah, is referred to as the father of the sons of Eber, which may have a similar meaning. Some authors argue that Ibri denotes the descendants of the biblical patriarch Eber, son of Shelah, a great-grandson of Noah, and an ancestor of Abraham. It says here Hebrew adjective, from Latin Hebraeos, from Greek Hebraios, from Aramaic Semitic Hebrai, corresponding to Hebrew Ibri, an Israelite, traditionally from an ancestral name Eber, but probably literally one from the other side, perhaps in reference to the river Euphrates, or perhaps simply signifying immigrant from Eber region on the other or opposite side. Boom! My immigrants. So they refused to build the tower, right? And they went to the other side. So check this out. Just look at this. Pangaea, right? So the land of Hebrew, Shem, Ham. These were all melanated, copper-colored people. The whole earth was. So it's not about white and black, but that's another topic. So once again, we read about Eber, and these are the 10 tribes. So 2 Esdras 13:40-44. Remember, this is the apocryphal book. It was taken out of the original Bibles. This was found. A lot of this was found. It was destroyed when they had it. They actually destroyed this book, and a lot of it was found after, like in the Dead Sea Scrolls and all that. So 2 Esdras 13:40 tells us these are the 10 tribes that were taken captives from their land in the days of King Hoshea, whom King Shalmaneser of the Assyrians took across the river as captive. They were taken into another land, but they made this plan for themselves. They would leave the multitude of the nations and go into a more remote region where the human race had never lived. There they would be able to observe their customs, which they hadn't kept in their own region. They went in through the narrow passages of the Euphrates River. Then the Most High gave them signs and stopped the flow of the river until they had passed. So, what is it saying there? And there's a lot of versions, obviously, I would say, and in different English. So, look what it's telling us. And they took this book out. So they went captive to another land, but they was like, you know what, let's just go over there. Let's separate ourselves, right? Just like it says Eber and his family did when they didn't want to build the tower. Okay? Where did they go? Where the human race had never lived. Alright, so keep that in mind. So, alright, so it says here about the Indians, or how they call them red man, right? Red man, red, dark red man, copper. The name Indian was conferred upon them from the real or fancied resemblance to the people of India. If we know the ancient Indians were really copper colored as well, then yes, that's why they called them India. And also outside of Europe, a lot of places were called, well, most places, the continents were called the Three Indias. Like if you know the sort of Prester John and the Three Indias, or just a reference of the Indias and the Indies, usually in reference to people of color where they live. But with any such similarity, the name would have been the same, for Columbus and his followers, believing that they had only rediscovered the Indies, would of course call the inhabitants Indians. According to John Clark, the origin of the North American Indians is involved in complete obscurity. That they are one of the older races of mankind cannot be doubted. Okay, so they are one of the oldest, okay, original. He's saying it can't be doubted, alright? But at what date or by what route they came to the Western continent is an unsolved problem. Okay, so he doesn't know, they don't know how they got there. They don't know anything, right? Okay, so am I the only one saying that the natives might be Hebrew lost tribes? Is this my concept or my idea? It's not. I'm going to show you how this is actually something that's been talked about for centuries already, and why. And hopefully you'll see with the archaeological stuff, the biblical stuff, and just senses, using your senses, right? Using your sight, hearing, your intuition. You got to use them, your heart. We'll try to put this together. As Maya Angelou says, Wouldn't it be wonderful when Black history, Native American history, and Jewish history, and all of U.S. history is taught from one book? Just U.S. history. What is she trying to tell you right there? Think about it. In Isaiah 5:13, therefore my people are gone into captivity because they have no knowledge. No knowledge. Yeah, so talking about captivity and slavery, you know, I want to bring your attention to the dumb verses, the pop-up bull, okay? This is something that was done in 1452 by Pope Nicholas V, right? So let's read here what it says in Wikipedia. So it says dumb verses, which means until different. You hear that? Until different. Is a papal bull issued on 18th of June 1452 by Pope Nicholas V. It authorized Alonso V of Portugal to conquer Saracens and pagans and consign them to perpetual servitude. Alright, so what does that mean? You know, perpetual slavery. And who are these Saracens and pagans? You know, what exactly does that mean? You know, so remember, this is 1452. Before they traveled to America, right? 1492 is when Columbus discovered America, right? So what they were doing? They were plotting. They were planning. They were getting all the permits. All the political stuff agreed upon with the kings, right? They're going to go invade, right? So I want to read you some more of this dumb verses, right? So it says, the doctrine of discovery, also called the doctrine of Christian discovery, is founded on a series of papal bulls or edicts written between 1452 and 1493. The first was from Pope Nicholas V in 1452 called the Dumb Verses, and it states the following, so pay attention to this, right? So, who are in the Americas, right? So, we want to grant you, King of Portugal, full and free power, through the apostolic authority by this edict, to invade, conquer, fight, subjugate the Saracens, Muslims and pagans, and other infidels and other enemies of Christ, and wherever established their kingdoms, right? Their kingdoms, their duchies, their royal palaces, their principalities, and other dominions, lands, places, estates, camps, and any other possessions, mobile and immobile, goods found in all these places, and held in whatever name, and held and possessed by the same, and to lead their persons in perpetual servitude. Perpetual servitude. That means you're still a slave. You understand what this is saying? They gave permission. Look at the description. Saracens, Muslims, and pagans, and any other infidels of other enemies of Christ. That's anybody who didn't go down with the Roman Catholic at that time. Anybody. Anybody. The Indians. Anybody in the world. Anybody. Especially the Indians. So they were already getting ready for this, okay? You see what this is, right? And before Columbus went, he knew where he was doing. He knew where he was going. They were already setting him up for that. Alright, so I'm going to show you that. Alright, so yeah, one more time. Again, the Papa Bull, 1452, Dumb Verses. Pope Nicholas V authorizes King Alonso V of Portugal to invade, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans, to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to take away all their possessions and property. So basically, Christians encountering non-Christians could take everything. You hear that? Everything. Even if these people had kingdoms, even if these people were already Jews and they had religions in their empires and their cities, and even if they lived in peace, everything, they got permission. So I'm going to show you what Columbus knew before he came to America. It wasn't no mistake. He didn't get lost. Let me show you. Yeah, so Columbus wasn't so innocent, and you know, like Bob Marley says, half the story has never been told, you know. Regarding Christopher Columbus, all his life Columbus' ideas about geography were permeated with a peculiar religious mysticism. He kept a book of prophecies in which he collected quotations, mostly from the Bible, often those dealing with isles far off. or islands, right? Or lands. He kept a book of prophecies in which he collected quotations, mostly from the Bible, often those dealing with isles far off, lands or islands, that seemed to prophesy his own discoveries. We're told a certain story in school about Columbus, and it's not even close to being true, okay? So he was never lost. He knew where he was going. He called them Indians because the rest of the world was called the Three Indias, and the Indies was known as the Indies, America. So he knew where he was going, okay? So he wrote a book. It's called the Book of Prophecies by Christopher Columbus. You know, if you look for it on the internet, it's there. I'll try to put the link here. If you need it, just let me know. I got it. So, you know, this book, basically, he describes what his intention is, why he's going to the Americas, who's he doing it for, and you know, that he basically feels like he is a prophet, like he's basically fulfilling a prophecy by discovering America, the Indians, right? Why? Because we're gonna learn who they were. He knew who they were. He knew they were Jews. He knew those were the lost tribes. He knew Jerusalem was over there. He knew Mount Zion was over there. And I'm gonna let you see that from his words right now. Here from an excerpt of the book. Amongst the earliest and most fascinating witnesses to the latter is a manuscript of 84 folios dated between September 13th, 1501 and March 23rd, 1502, and now preserved in the Biblioteca Colombina in Sevilla. Okay, this is preserved in a prestige library in Spain. It begins, and this is in Christopher Columbus' own words. This is the beginning of the book or collection of authorities, sayings, opinions, and prophecies concerning the need to recover the holy city and Mount Zion, and the discovery and conversion of the islands of the Indies and all of peoples and nations, for Ferdinand and Isabella are Spanish rulers. It says, this manuscript, commonly known as El Libro de las Profecías or Book of Prophecies, was compiled by Christopher Columbus himself in collaboration with Gaspar Gorizio, a Carthusian monk of Italian origin who belonged to the monastery of Santa Maria de las Cuevas in Sevilla. Okay, so again, what did it say? That he is going to recover the holy city and Mount Zion, and also for the discovery and conversion of the islands of the Indies and the peoples and nations. He knows what's over there. What is he saying? It's in America? The holy city. What's the holy city? Jerusalem. We're going to see that in another video. That's in Peru. Mount Zion. You know, Mount Zion. The navel of the world, the center of the world. Cusco is the center of the world. The name Cusco means navel of the world. Mount Zion is considered the navel of the world. Jerusalem is considered the navel of the world. Peru, Cusco means navel of the world. So that's just another video, but just you can see Christopher Columbus knew where he was going and who was over there. Okay, so I'm going to continue here. The transcription of the September 13, 1501 letter in which Columbus explained the project and asked for assistance. So this is where he's saying, right? Reverend and very devoted Father, when I came here to Granada, where is Granada? Caribbean, right? Okay. I began to collect in a book of excerpts from I began to collect in book excerpts from authoritative sources that seemed to me to refer to Jerusalem. I plan to review them later and to arrange them appropriately. Then I became involved in my other activities and did not have time to proceed with my work, nor do I now. So he's too busy conquering and killing people. You understand? So then I became involved, well, let's go, sorry. And so I am sending the book to you so that you can look at it. Perhaps your soul will motivate you to continue the project, that our Lord will guide you to genuine authorities. The search for text should be continued in the Bible and the commentary. It is often useful and should be used for clarification. And that was Christopher Columbus' Book of Prophecies. Libro de las Profecías, or the Book of Prophecies by Christopher Columbus. He knew what he was coming to do, and he had the permission, dum diversas, from the Pope, Nicholas. They already had set it up. They came to conquer. They knew what they were doing. They wrote us a lie, a history, a bullshit, and we still believe it. Now, here's some more evidence about Hebrews in America. And it says here, in order to provide a truthful and reliable account of the origins of these Indian nations, an origin so doubtful and obscure, we would need some divine revelation or assistance to reveal this origin to us and help us understand it. However, lacking that revelation, we can only speculate and conjecture about these beginnings, basing ourselves on the evidence provided by these people whose strange ways, conduct, and lowly actions are so like those of the Hebrews. Like who? Like the Hebrews. Thus, we can almost positively affirm that they are Jews and Hebrews, and I would not commit a great error if I were to state this as fact, considering their way of life, their ceremonies, their rites and superstitions, their omens and hypocrisies, so akin to and characteristic of those of the Jews. In no way do they seem to differ. The Holy Scriptures bear witness to this, and from them we draw proofs and reasons for holding this opinion to be true. Chapter 1. It says here, in the Museum of the Jewish People, the Myth of the Lost Tribes. It says here, in South America, the hypothesis connecting the American Indians to the 10 lost tribes of Israel was advanced mainly by Spanish missionaries and travelers while coming across impressive archaeological remains of the pre-Columbian civilizations or investigating the way of life of local tribes believed to recognize various customs and beliefs that they related to the Bible and Judaism. Most reports refer to native tribes living in regions that today are part of Bolivia, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Peru, but also in the countries of Central America, especially Mexico. Among the prominent expositors of those theories, a mention should be made of Father Diego Duran, 1588, author of The Aztecs, The History of the Indies of the New Spain, Father Gregorio Garcia, and his Origin de los Indios de los Nuevo Mundo, 1729. Alright, here we are at the Jewish Virtual Library. And this is regarding Montesinos, well, Antonio de Montesinos, right? So we're going to learn who he was and what he said about his encounter here in the Americas, okay? Jewish Library, Project Base, okay? It says here, Montesinos Antonio, Marrano traveler on a trip to South America during 1641-42. Montesinos discovered a group of natives in Ecuador who could recite the Shema and were acquainted with other Jewish rituals. He brought this news to Amsterdam in 1644, and the congregational authorities, Manasseh ben Israel, among them, had him repeat his account under oath. So Manasseh ben Israel, you can see who that is, very important Jewish scholar. That the assumption was that these natives were a remnant of the 10 lost tribes, of the tribes of Reuben and Levi, according to Montesinos. He then left for Brazil, where he died, reasserting on his deathbed to the truth of his report. Manasseh ben Israel dwells on Montesinos' discovery in a booklet entitled Esperanza de Israel, The Hope of Israel, in Amsterdam 1650, which I'm about to show you right now, right after this, which he dedicated to the British Parliament, appending it to the petition for the readmittance of Jews to England. His thesis was that Montesinos' account points to an imminent fulfillment of messianic prophecy of the lost tribes of Israel being reunited with Judah. The Montesinos report aroused literary interest even outside Jewish circles. In 1650, Thomas Thorogood publishes A Use in America, or Probabilities that the Americans are of that race. We also have this book. Who is this guy, right? It says Manuel Dios Soeiro, better known by his Hebrew name Manasseh ben Israel, also Menashe ben Joseph ben Israel, also known with his Hebrew acronym MBY, was a Portuguese rabbi, Kabbalist, writer, diplomat, printer, and publisher, founder of the first Hebrew printing press, named Emeth Meretz Tisma in Amsterdam. The Hope of Israel by Manasseh ben Israel, and Hebrew divine and philosopher, it says here, right? It says The Hope of Israel, right? It's a book that he wrote. In addition to messianic and other mystic hopes, were the current in English, his book The Hope of Israel had first been published in Amsterdam in Hebrew, Mishke Israel, and in Latin, Spes Israelis. In 1651, he offered to serve Christina, Queen of Sweden, as her agent of Hebrew books. Okay, so he's mad important, right? In 1652, his book was translated into English and published in London, prefixed with the dedication to the Parliament and the Council of State. His account of descendants of the lost tribes being found in the New World deeply impressed public opinion and stirred up many polemics in English literature. Alright, so what does it just say? It says his accounts of the descendants of the lost tribes being found in the New World deeply impressed public opinion and stirred up many polemics in English literature. You see? It says here, the Indians of the Yucatan and the Acusanitenses do circumcise themselves. The Teutones of New Spain and Mexicans, as Roman and Gomasa and general history of the Indians testify, rend their garments if there were happen any sudden misfortune or death of any. Gregorius Gracious in Monarchia in Gasonum and Isle of Peru says that the Guanacapus, hearing that his Sone Atahualpa fled for fear of the army of his enemy, he rent his garments. The Mexicans and Teutones or the Totocanenses kept continually fire upon their altars, as God commanded in Leviticus. Those of Peru do the same in their temples dedicated to the sun. The Nicaraguenses do forbid their women who were lately brought a bed to enter their temples till they are purified. The inhabitants of Hispaniola think those do sin who lie with a woman lie after her childbirth, and the Indians of New Spain do severely punish sodomy. Many of the Indians do bury the dead on the mountains, which also is a Jewish custom, and Garcia said that the name Shanaan is found in those countries. You may wonder at this, that the Indians do every 50 years celebrate Jubilee with great pomp in Mexico and metropolis of the whole province. Also, that on the Sabbath day all are bound to be present in the temple to perform their sacrifices and ceremonies. They also were discovered from their wives. They also were divorced from their wives if they were not honest. The Indians of Peru, New Spain, and Guatemala did marry the widows of their dead brethren. May not you judge from these things that the Jews lived in those places, and that the Gentiles learned such things of them? Added also to what has been said that the knowledge which the Indians had of the creation of the world and of the universal flood they borrowed from the Israelites. So this is the book Manasseh ben Israel and His World. Alright? It says the rise and fall of the Jewish Indian theory. Okay, so says here, whenever I tell students in America that there was a serious theory years ago that the Indians were Jews and that some of the lost tribes were located in America, they looked blankly at me, and if it's my nonsense, or they laughed embarrassedly to be in a room where such things are said. However, I quickly tried to calm their fears by pointing out that after Columbus met the Indians in 1492, there was a problem accounting for who they were and where they came from. Okay, again, nobody knew who they were, where they came from, right? If everyone on the surface of the earth was a descendant of Adam and Eve, and the 7 survivors of the flood, then the Indians had to be connected to the biblical world. Columbus himself had no problem. He thought they were Asians, since he was sure that he had reached Cathay. That's what the story is, right? It says explorers and missionaries offered theories tracing the Indians back to migrations from the Middle East, from Phoenicia, Arabia, or maybe from Solomon's Ophir. To deny a biblical origin for the Indians was to see them in their history as outside of the scripture, and scripture as incomplete and inadequate. Okay. To deny a biblical origin for the Indians was to see them and their history as outside of scripture, and scripture as incomplete and inadequate. Only a few hardy souls in the 16th century dared suggest this. Paracelsus, Giordano Bruno, Christopher Marlowe, and maybe Sir Walter Raleigh. It's a little more down below. It says here regarding the Puritans and what they thought about the colonists, because a lot of them were saying that, you know, they were Satan's children and they were wild, they were savage, you know. So according to the Puritans, because they were living there, it says, besides the settler missionaries found matters in Massachusetts Bay Colony quite different than Meade had described. They found docile, friendly Indians, some of whom wanted to become Christians, according to them, right? I don't know if they would really want to become Christians. They established schools for them, and they tried to get the great John Comenius to use Harvard as the center of universal enlightenment for Indians and Europeans. They translated the scriptures for the Indians. It says, and it continues, so pay attention to this part. The missionaries began to suspect something radically different was going on in the environs of Boston, namely that pure English Christians were baptizing and converting Indians who were Jews. Wow. Alright. What were they doing? They were baptizing and converting Indians who were Jews. So that's what the Puritans were realizing. And if the Indians were Jews, an enormous missionary effort would be needed. So on behalf of the New England Missionary Society, a volume was written by the Norfolk preacher one Thomas Thorogood called Jews in America, or the probability that the Indians are Jews. This was dedicated to Charles I. Okay? He had heard from the most learned Jewish writer of the time, his friend and co-worker Manasseh ben Israel, that Portuguese Marrano explorer Antonio de Montesinos had encountered a Jewish tribe in the Andes Mountains. He knew that Manasseh had had Montesinos, who came to Amsterdam in 1644, give his account before a notary. So Dury, who was at the time planning to set up a college of Jewish studies in London with Manasseh as one of his 3 professors, wrote Manasseh for a copy of the Montesinos report. Unconvinced until he was finally willing to say that the group encountered by Montesinos could be part of the lost tribe, okay, while the rest of the inhabitants of the Americas were migrants from Asia. So he only accepted one tribe, but alright, so you can see if one is there, then the rest are also there, and we're going to show you that. Holmes immediately pointed out that this meant that the climax of world history was at hand, because the lost tribes were beginning to reappear. Manasseh was asked what was the Jewish view about the lost tribes and their reappearance. Rather than write another letter, Manasseh wrote his most famous work, The Hope of Israel, which appeared in 1650 in Spanish, Latin, Hebrews, and English and Dutch. The American Indian descended from the 10 lost tribes. And so it says in the article. So it says, last month's column sketched the basis for the belief that American Indian is descended from the 10 lost tribes. One of the foremost proponents of this theory was the Indian trader James Adair, 1709-1783. In 1775 he wrote The History of the Indians, arguably the most significant 19th century work on the southeastern Indians, in which he presented 23 arguments that proved the North American aborigines were descended from the 10 lost tribes. These are their division in tribes, their worship of Jehovah, their notions of theocracy, their belief in the administration of angels, their language and dialects, their manner of counting time, their prophets and high priests, their festivals, fast and religious rites, their daily sacrifice, their ablutions and anointings, their laws of uncleanliness, their abstinence from unclean things, their marriage, divorces, punishments of adultery, their several punishments, their cities of refuge, their purification and preparatory ceremonies, the ornaments, their manner of curing the sick, their burial of the dead, their mourning for the dead, their raising the seed to descend, their change of the names adapted to the circumstances and times, their own traditions, the account of English writers, and the testimonies given by Spaniards and other writers of the primitive inhabitants of Mexico and Peru. Wasn't going to take it there yet, but there you go, Mexico and Peru. Okay, So yeah, so this is the JewishPress.com. Okay, so we're gonna come back to this. It says here in the Literary Digest, September 21st, 1912, are the Indians of Hebrew origin. William Penn gave the clue to many subsequent biblical scholars in the declaring that he had found in the American Indians the lost tribes of Israel. The superficial resemblance between the two peoples was so striking that he was led to say, "When I look at their children, I imagine myself in the Jewish quarter of London." The Reverend J. Wesley Anas says in Zion's Herald in Boston that as late as 1889, a well-informed representative of the Moshkoki, Moshkoki tribe, again, remember that word. When questioned concerning the legends of his people, he replied, "They are all in the Old Testament. Read them there without the trouble of taking them down from our people." Corroborative of this statement of Dr. W. W. Warren in his History of the Ojibwe Nation, that in response to parts of the Bible, which he translated for his people, they said, "The book must be true, for our ancestors have told us the same stories for generations. The theory here presented is not new. The Jewish Encyclopedia given the substance of it without pronouncing upon its credibility. The writer meets the objection to the theory based on the great distance between the habitations of the two people by citing the book of Esdras. They affirm that after the captivity of Hebrews resolved to separate themselves from the heathen and to seek a spot where they might religiously observe the law, for the violation of which they had been so severely punished. Accordingly, he reports them to have migrated to a country which was uninhabited, and so far distant that they journeyed for a year and a half or even more. This theory is further supported by the writings of the famous Manasseh ben Israel, who tells us that the America and Asia, now separated by Bering Strait, were formerly one continent, and that during this early period these Hebrews penetrated to America by land, before it separated. Still more conclusive proof is found in comparative study of the language, religion, customs, and traditions of the two peoples. Such resemblances as these are noted, like the Hebrews, the Indians, when first visited by the Europeans, were a very religious people, yet they had entirely escaped the idolatry which was common to almost all ancient peoples. They acknowledged but one God, the Great Spirit, and the name by which he was known was Ale, the old Hebrew name for God. In their dances they were heard to say distinctively, Hallelujah, or Praise Jah. They were the very word which was used by the Hebrews themselves. They kept annual festivals which resembled those of the Mosaic ritual. They performed morning and evening sacrifices and offered of their first fruits to God. They practiced the rite of circumcision and celebrated a feast like the tabernacles. They had cities of refuge to which even a murderer might flee and be safe. The Indians reckoned time in the same manner as the Hebrews, and their year began at the same season. The same superstitions seem to have marked their burial places. The same creeds were the rule of their lives, both as to the present and the future. The Indians, as well as the ancient Hebrews, lived in tribes ruled by chiefs, and their forms of government were almost identical. The clan system of the Indians has preserved a clue to some of the mysterious rites of the early Hebrews. What is not known about the clan system of the Iroquois explain what was formerly mystical about the tribes of Israel. Each tribe had a totem, usually some animal such as a deer, a bear, or a panther. So also had Israelites such a totem, and this explains why in the blessings of Jacob upon his sons, Judah is surnamed a lion, Dan a serpent, Benjamin a wolf, Joseph a bull. Literary Digest, September 21st, 1912. This here, BreakingIsraelNews.com. Are Native Americans part of the 10 lost tribes? When Europeans first glimpsed Native Americans more than 400 years ago, many were convinced they had discovered the lost tribes of Israel. At closer look, the connections are astounding. This hidden association has taken on great importance recently as the two nations face similar threats. and perhaps even a common messianic vision quest. Those unmistakable traces of Jewish prayer echo in the voice of Joseph Riverwind, the Amun-Ra war chief of the Northern Arawak Nation, the indigenous peoples of South America and the Caribbean, as he sings Shema Shema Nayena Popaska Hoya Ya. He translated his ancient Native American song for Breaking Israel News. Listen, listen, people, as you gather together, we will dance before the Creator. This is strongly reminiscent of the Jewish prayer Shema, which literally means hear. And he says, among my people, our ancient name for God is Jah, the Supreme Spirit of Spirits, very similar to Yahweh. Chief Riverwind explained, among my wife's ancestors, the Anikituwaya, the Cherokee, they called God Jehovah. The similarities don't stop there. They carried an ark into battle, celebrate 7 feasts, kept a 7th day of rest, had cities of refuge, and don't eat pork. Though the eerie etymological similarities may be coincidental, archetypal themes also connect the spirituality of Native Americans to the Bible. Chief Riverwind told the Choctaw story about how the Creator came to a man called Nuah and told him the world would be covered with water. The man was told to make a great raft to save mankind. The stories come from oral tradition which date to pre-Columbian times. Says another Native American story tells of a time when the world was all one landmass and we were all one tribe, explained Chief Riverwind. We tried to build a sky tower to the Creator, hence Babel, right? The story of Babel. These are the pre-missionary oral traditions. They are passed down through specially trained storytellers who are forbidden from changing a single word. And he continues saying, some Anishinaabe, Chippewa, believe they are from the tribe of Ephraim. Chief Riverwind explains Anishinaabe is amazing similar to the Hebrew word Anshinabi, people of the prophet. They lived on the coast, but their legends say that before that they came from across the great waters. We have cave drawings of these ships that are very similar to drawings of Phoenician ships in history books. Again, Phoenician connecting with the Hebrew, right? The Paleo-Hebrew, the Phoenicians, the Meshechs, right? The Aztecs. Okay, so it says theuniverse.com. More Jewish prominent sites here, okay? Native Americans, the lost tribe. Looking at Jews and Native Americans side by side, you might think there's no way to mix up the two cultures. Jarmulkes and eagle-feathered headdresses look quite different, right? But some early colonial Americans thought upon discovering the early inhabitants of the Americas that they were the chosen people, perhaps one or more of the lost tribes. Early American writings argued that different Native American languages unfamiliar to European ears were slight variations on Hebrew. And when some white settlers discovered what they thought was a set of tefillin in an Indian town in Pittsfield, Massachusetts in the early 1800s, they used this incident to further support their claim. By linking America's earliest inhabitants with the Bible and its theology, these idealistic colonists suggested the America was indeed the new promised land. It says at the time, Jews in colonial America took the lost tribes claim very seriously, and they reacted in sermons, plays, public statements, scholarly works, and popular writings. Why was it such a big deal to them? And what were the social ramifications? The interactions between Jews and Native Americans make for a great story that few remember anymore. Okay, so more corroborating information. They're even saying, what, they're telling you these people really, they were living with them, so they knew what they were seeing and what kind of people they were dealing with. They reminded them of the Jews in Europe. It says here in Wikipedia, the 10 lost tribes were the 10 of the 12 tribes of the ancient Israel that were said to have been deported from the kingdom of Israel after its conquest by the Neo-Assyrian Empire, circa 722 BC. These are the tribes of Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and Joseph. Claims of descent from the lost tribes have been proposed in relation to many groups, and some religions oppose a messianic view that the tribes will return. It says here, the 12 tribes, scriptural basis for the idea of the 10 lost tribes is 2 Kings 17:6. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and deported the Israelites to Assyria. He settled them in Halah, in Gozan on the harbor river, and in the towns of the Medes. According to the Hebrew Bible, Jacob, who was later named Israel, Genesis 35:10, had 12 sons, at least one daughter, Dinah, by 2 wives and 2 concubines. The 12 sons fathered the 12 tribes of Israel. You see, there was different moms. So that's different kinds of tribes and different people, right? Different families. It says here, the Mormon scripture in the lost tribes of Israel. When the Mormons first emerged in 1830s America, Constantine Samuel Rafinesque, a Christian polymath of French-German heritage, attacked them for their singular but absurd opinion that the American tribes are descended from the Hebrews or the 10 lost tribes. Atlantic Journal, Friend of Knowledge, Volume 1, 1833. Strange as it sounds today, such notions of ancestry were widespread among British and American Christians of the time. So why you think at the time people were saying that? Because they were there amongst the people living with them. They were seeing who these people were. I have this PDF here, The Jewish Advocate, February 27, 2015. It says, Pittsfield Jewish Life on the Western Frontier of Massachusetts. Perhaps the earliest reference to a Jew in Pittsfield was way back in 1815 when it was reported that a boy clearing an employer's Joseph Merrick's Fort Hill yard of rubbish dug up a set of tefillin. Ensuing press coverage about the find caused quite a stir across the country, and clergy and scholars flocked to Pittsfield to examine the parchment scrolls enclosed in their leather boxes. At the time, many people believed that the Native Americans were descendants from the lost tribes of Israel, and they were convinced that the tefillin had been dropped by an ancient Israelite who perhaps had traveled across the Bering Strait or by boat across the Atlantic. It says in an article with the Agatha Christie-ish titled The Case of the Missing Phylactery by William Goetzman reports that the tefillin were donated to the American Antiquarian Society in Worcester on condition that the scholars there publish an article about them. The society failed to produce one, so the tefillin were sent to New Jersey scholar Elias Bodinat. Upon Bodinat's death, his heirs donated his papers to Yale University. Yale, Skull and Bones, once again, Skull and Bones. If you don't know, research it. Yale University. But the tefillin were not among them, so it got lost. Great, in Yale University. They have not been seen since. Okay, so there you go again. Just like what the Smithsonian does. And it says, continuing with Bodinat, while Bodinat and Crawford and other millenarians, people who believed that the end of the world was coming during that time, saw the Indians as the lost tribes, new evidence emerged. The 2 new theories were offered, in one that of the leading Jewish spokesman Mordecai Noah, the other by the founder of Mormonism, Joseph Smith. The new evidence were some artifacts that were discovered. One, phylacteries that were found in an Indian burial mound in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Another, a Hebrew inscription outside New Milford, Connecticut. The third, a Hebrew tomb in Ohio, added to the alleged resemblances that the Lord Kingsborough thought he had found in the Aztec codices to ancient Hebrew motifs. Lord Kingsborough published 9-folio volumes of the codices, magnificently illustrated with copious notes from Manasseh Adair and others, to prove the Indians, especially those of Central America, were Jews. Although he bankrupted himself in the process of publishing the material, he convinced only the already convinced and became a laughingstock to others. The Hebrew inscription in New Milford was examined by America's greatest Christian Hebraist, Ezra Stiles, president of Yale University again, who guessed it was somebody's name. No one in the area could be found who was Jewish or who knew Hebrew. So a suggestive mystery remained. The phylacteries were a more exciting find. When it was realized that these are used by a Jew in his morning prayers, the physical object was found around 1820, halfway down a pile of Indian bones in a burial mound. Because of the Hebrew letters contained in the object, Christian scholars from Harvard were consulted who identified the object for what it was. But how did it get to where it was found? An intensive investigation was carried out to find out if any Jewish traders had been in Pittsfield, if any captured British soldiers had held there were Jewish, with negative results. The great Jewish convert, the Reverend Joseph Frey, who gave 30,000 sermons in America, said he had never spoken in Pittsfield, and the phylacteries were not his. Says the literature of the period indicates that this discovery was taken very seriously as pointing to the possibility that the Indians were Jewish. No other explanation could be found for the phylacteries being where they were found. The item was deposited with the Massachusetts Historical Society for further study. By now, when some of us would like to see what was discovered, however, the item has been lost. Here we go again. The item was lost. Like everything else that doesn't fit into history. Pay attention, people, man. They hide things intentionally. The late Rabbi Arthur Chill, who wrote an article on the matter and turned up a lot of literature, some rather incredible, in the period of 1820 to 1825 on the subject, also found that the phylacteries had been in the Antiquarian Society of Worcester, Massachusetts, but that they had disappeared. So it says here again, the Mormon movement has been described as the first real indigenous American religion, building on the biblical tradition and the American situation. It claimed that new revelatory material that showed that some of the ancient Jews went to the America instead of Babylon at the time of the destruction of the first temple, that Jesus preached to them in America, and that they, the later-day saints, were the bearers of the Christianity and would lead them into the millennium. The Mormon claim is not that all Indians are Jews, but that a remnant of the ancient Hebrews exists in America and will join with the followers of Joseph Smith. And it says here, a curious incident that drew considerable attention and proved, at least to some, that Native Americans had ancient Israelite origins unfolded when a tefillin, phylacteries, were discovered in Pittsfield, Massachusetts in the early 19th century. Their discoverer wrote that this forms another link in the evidence by which our Indians are identified with the ancient Jews who were scattered upon the face of the globe, and to this day remain a living monument to verify and establish the eternal truths of Scripture. Another prominent Jew who talks about the natives and the Hebrew connection is Mordecai Manuel Noah. One of Noah's writings on Jewish natives came to their full expression with his discourse on the evidences of the American Indians being the descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, 1837. The work documented a host of theological, linguistic, ritual, dietary, and political parallels between Jews and Native Americans. Most importantly, he identified several essential character traits shared by the two peoples, all of which were, of course, highly laudable for Noah. The conflation of Indians and Jews sanctioned the later as divinely ordained Americans.